economic growth is back. Amazingly, the government has had some fairly good economic news this week. There has been an expansion of GDP in the United Kingdom. We are now out of recession. The economy grew by 0.6% in the first 3 months of this year. The Office for National Statistics saying the period from January to the end of March marked a return to growth after a mild recession, a better performance than expected by economists who forecasted growth of 0.4%. At the same time, it looks like inflation will potentially hit the 2% target in the next few months, and we could well have interest rate cuts by June. Lots to think about here. We're also seeing forecasts of better growth in 2025, giving a better inheritance to whatever government is elected. We have some inkling of what kind of government that might be in October or November. I'm Toby, joined on the pod as always. Welcome to Political Paradigms. Theo is here. Theo, hello.
Hello, I hope I sound better this week.
You do. And Sonny is here. Sonny, hello.
Hello. I think I sound the same.
Theo loves to have a rant about economics on this podcast, so I'll go to him first. Theo, in raw political terms, obviously it's good if we're not in recession. Obviously it's good if we're seeing economic growth, just generally speaking. Putting that in context, we are still going to be poorer at the end of this parliament than the beginning. I don't think any government has ever won in those circumstances. We've got the aftershock of inflation. Governments around the world have paid a penalty for that, regardless of growth figures. I mean, Joe Biden can tout strong growth figures. It doesn't stop him being one of the least popular presidents in living memory. Does the return of real growth, not sort of 0.001% growth as they were bragging about last year, does the return to growth help Rishi Sunak politically? Is this something Labour should be worried about?
I think that when The Telegraph recently said that this was a gift to Rishi Sunak, it showed how completely out of touch they were. Even if there was a material improvement in people's day-to-day circumstances, which I highly doubt, it is virtually nothing to do with government policy, and people know that. And even the Telegraph had to admit that. So, yes, we have seen some statistics beginning to show a gradual recovery.
And we kind of expected this, right? We kind of expected this, right? This was kind of penciled in.
Yes, exactly. And of course, we've got forecasts that the growth will continue, and ostensibly it's true, but we know forecasts generally are not the most reliable. And I think very little economically could shift the political consensus. I maintain the position I've had on the pod for a while. As the local elections have shown, it takes something quite cataclysmic to really shift the fortunes of the parties. And if the economy is not one of them, and there we have seen improvements in the last week. The idea that it's a gift to Rishi Sunak, it's a very hard position to argue. Even the Telegraph says it's very difficult to claim people are better off when, despite these improvements, GDP per capita remains below pre-pandemic levels. Many voters will feel too little, too late, and not only that, but the devaluation of the pound since the start of the pandemic is still in full effect compared to like pre-summer 2020.
Yeah,
It's not at a literal historical level anymore, so apparently it's not deemed newsworthy. And when Rachel Reeves says the Tories are trying to gaslight the public about economic performance, her words, not mine, I think she's wrong, because gaslighting implies you actually succeed in manipulating your target. I don't think anyone's buying it. I don't think this spells any positive news for their electoral fortunes.
Strong words from Theo there. Actually, I subscribe to the view, and it kind of is, it contradicts sort of conventional wisdom in a way. But we've talked a lot on this pod about sort of Labour squaring the circle. We're not going to raise taxes, not going to do this, not going to do that, but also we're going to fix public services, and we're going to magically get growth. Well, if we accept that economic growth isn't going to sort of magically shift the dial when the governing party is trailing by 20 points and has loads of problems and people aren't going to feel insanely better off, well, in a way, this helps Labour, because they come into office and maybe in 2025 it doesn't feel like the sky's falling in. Maybe, a bit like how Bill Clinton benefited from the Bush recovery and Donald Trump benefited from the Obama recovery, maybe Labour will benefit from the Sunak-Hunt recovery. What do you make of this, Sonny?
It's quite possible. I think that people in the last few, kind of during Rishi Sunak's time, haven't been saying that, the kind of the kind of quite stupid, ridiculous economic policy of Liz Truss. I think they've been talking about how it has been stable. Nothing's really happened, as in nothing groundbreaking, but it's been quite stable. And Labour Party seem to be taking the same stance, again, not really promising anything major. Like the ones that kind of spring to mind is like the kind of the Green Party policy of, spending, I don't know, it was like 28 billion at one point. It's been cut. The Labour Party want to keep a very stable ship. They're not really promising anything. So I think this could really benefit Labour. But it depends how they play it, to be honest, and depends what the Conservative Party try and say coming up to the general election. But no, it could be very beneficial, like you said, with kind of Bush and Clinton and previous governments.
Yeah, I suppose the other example would be the Tories would argue Tony Blair benefited from the John Major recovery. And, the economy was going great by 1997. Didn't save the Tories. I think, and even in America, if Joe Biden wins, it's not going to be because of the economy. Voters don't like the economy. It's going to be because of sort of other issues.
My tech stocks are doing great, to be fair.
Your tech stocks are doing great, are they, Theo? Well, it's all right for some, isn't it? I actually do know that the most Tory person I know did say to me the other week, they were like, I think things are great in the country. My stocks are up. I was like, okay.
Great measure of the condition of the country.
It's, so the battle for the economy is going to be the big story of May, I think. The big main story. It's more important for the election than a lot of the other chatter that we'll be getting onto later about defecting MPs and MRP polling and different metrics. But the Tories, obviously, and they've kept briefing this again and again, this will be the point things turn around. This will be the point things turn around. They now think this is the point things turn around because they're going to have some growth. They're going to have some good inflation numbers. They're going to be able to start questioning Labour about stuff. Let's hear the two messages from the two parties. We'll start with Rachel Reeves, and I'll go to you, Theo, for a reaction to what she's saying. The gaslighting message, I think, is quite astute, and then we'll hear what Rishi Sunak had to say about the economy.
The Conservatives are gaslighting the British public. They say we've turned a corner. We won't have turned a corner until working people feel that they are better off. Because the state of the economy is about much more than lines on a graph. It's about the state of our high streets, the security of work, the money in people's pockets. People want change, and it falls to us, to the Labour Party, to offer that change, to show the ambition that the British people deserve. Not gimmicks, not shortcuts, driving the economic growth which will raise living standards, resource public services, and let Britain compete in the world once again. The choice at the next general election is simple. 5 more years of chaos with the Conservatives that will continue Britain on a path of economic decline. Or stability with a changed Labour Party that can offer hope with a long-term plan to make working people better off. It is time to turn the page, to start a new chapter in Britain's economic future. And Labour is ready.
Okay, Theo, your thoughts?
I mean, she was doing quite well. She was really diagnosing the problem, and then she kind of went for the whole "I'm a politician, I can fix everything" fallacy. But I think, no, being serious, she does make the point that, again, lines on a graph, figures, data. The data can lead you wherever you want to go. And I'm not saying that doesn't mean there isn't genuine recovery in the economy. But again, from pre-pandemic levels, from the start of this parliament, still, much worse off overall. And incremental improvements are not going to make enough of a material difference in the lives of working people who make up the majority of the voting electorate to actually pull this government out of its 20-point trail to the opposition, especially in light of the local elections, corruption scandals, everything else.
Let's have a listen to Rishi Sunak. He came out, it's quite unusual actually, to do the sort of interview instead of the Chancellor, who normally comes out at times like this. Again, this is very much politics. He's putting his face on the economic recovery the Tories think is coming. A lot of the thinking around an autumn election is, again and again, you hear it said. I mean, they even say it explicitly, sort of ministers on the media round. They go, we're waiting till the autumn. We're waiting for the election because we think people will feel better later in the year. That is their idea, and this is sort of Sunak leaning into this.
Prime Minister, typically, so when we do these GDP interviews, we're usually talking to the Chancellor, but we're very privileged. You've stepped in at the last minute. Why is it that you want to be here talking to us today?
Well, undoubtedly, the economy, the country has been through a tough couple of years with the war in Ukraine most recently, the pandemic before that, and I know that's taken a toll on people, and that's why ensuring a strong economy has been paramount in what I want to achieve for the country. And I am pleased that whilst, of course, there's more work to do, today's figures show that the economy now has real momentum, and I'm confident that with time people will start to feel the benefits of that. I mean, we've had multiple months now where wages are rising, energy bills have fallen, mortgage rates are down from the peak, taxes are being cut, and I said today's news just shows that the economy does have real momentum, more work to do, but I'm pleased with the progress that we're making.
Now,
Sonny, I suppose the question is this sort of a man out of time doing his best? He's leaning into the one message the Tories maybe have, Britain is growing at 0.6%, don't let Labour ruin it. Or is this just the wrong strategy from Sunak, full stop, do you think?
Yeah, I don't think the Conservative Party and Rishi Sunak generally, as in like a group, can win an election on some sort of economic argument. It's just kind of like, it's a bit like, are you actually kidding, to be perfectly honest? I mean, 0.6% growth isn't kind of something great. It's not particularly amazing. I mean, like, yeah, it's good. We want the economy to grow. Congratulations. Yeah, pat yourself on the back for as long as you want, really, but it should be about 30 seconds. It's just like, it's kind of just a bit futile. It just feels like some kind of like limp attempt to be like, oh, well, it's better. I mean, one bit that always reminds me, and if you can give me 30 seconds just to say it, it's Suella Braverman, when she was Home Secretary, went on the news, I can't remember which one, but was talking about how there is now a record high amount of police officers on the street, and she said, there's a record high amount of police officers, and the journalist interrupted and said, yeah, 3,000 more. She kind of was like, what? She was like, well, there's, like you said, there's now 24,000 police officers on the street. You got rid of 20,000 of them, or 21,000, and now you've brought an extra 3,000. So in the 14 years we've had the Conservative Party, we got rid of 20,000 police officers, and now we're just getting back to the levels of, 2010. I mean, it's like the whole Conservative Party government, the whole of these, since 2010 has been, I feel like, shadowed by the fact that they've cut so much, and they're only now roughly getting back to similar levels as it was 14 years ago. And I think it's the same principle with this. I mean, it's like 0.6% growth, like, great. Like Theo said, I don't think anyone's really feeling that on a day-to-day basis, and I don't think that's really going to swing the polls in any way.
Could I just add, it does seem like what we were alluding to the other week, or it might have been a month ago, that he's kind of just going through the motions.
Yeah.
Actually, again, like I said, data can lead to whatever narrative you want, and it's painfully obvious, similar to when Jeremy Hunt declared, a victory over inflation last year, which pretty much all came down to the regression of energy prices from their historic levels due to the Ukraine conflict, which he keeps constantly talking about to shift blame off himself. And again, this inflation announcement in like December was followed 2 months later by this totally unforeseen resurgence of inflation when it went up in January. My main point is that they've got to rubber stamp their face on any recovery that happens and shift blame on anything that goes wrong. And I will say, I think generally, like, macroeconomic forces are out of the control of the government. Policies they put into effect have unforeseen consequences that can be cataclysmic at times. And on the other hand, a lot of the things that go wrong are out of their control. But selectively claiming and cherry picking what does go right, it's obviously, dishonest. And I think people aren't buying it.
I can tell it irks you when politicians talk about the economy, Theo, sort of across the board. Because I think your tenet is you just think the way they talk about it across the board is just fundamentally dishonest, don't you?
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like it's the fact that the politician. I think there's like layers. There's like layers. You can listen to what the politicians say. That's one layer. And if you peel back that layer, you can go to the ONS website. And I'm not saying that they're lying on the ONS website. You can go there and you can read the data and you can see, well, this drop in inflation was all due to energy prices
Yeah.
and other things. Some things went up. Like home rental prices, something went up. And that's if you go to that second layer, you can see how just kind of blatantly dishonest it.
Yeah, I think the biggest moment for me where I sort of felt a strong lack of faith in our economic stewardship across the board was sort of the inflationary moment where everyone seemed to be saying, central banks around the world were saying, the cause of this inflation is like monetary, and if we raise interest rates, that'll stop it. And then took credit for raising interest rates and inflation coming down, even though the entire time the inflation was driven by an energy shock.
Yeah,
it just
exactly.
seems
They treat interest rates and printing money or monetary policy as like push and pull levers, like stop go gas pedals, like the 1960s,
and it's like
the Butterism or whatever.
It's like, bro, you didn't do this. Like, it went up not because of you, and it went down not because of you. Like, come on.
Yeah, exactly.
We've not lost. Inflation hasn't dropped because of the Bank of England. Inflation has dropped because it's dropped, and it might go up again. Like, do you know what I mean? It's anyway.
Yeah, and also if you consider the fact that the world is becoming an increasingly more complex system, increasingly more interconnected, as everything from Ukraine to Israel to the AI revolution has shown, more and more things are being influenced by global events and things happening a long way away, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So on to the other major story of the week. It looks like it's going to roll into this week. We'll see how it develops by the next pod next week. Natalie Elphicke, very right-wing Conservative MP, member of the ERG, defected to the Labour Party just in time for Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday. And for Labour, you understand the appeal of this. I wrote about this week. You've got like a human indictment of Rishi Sunak, a right-wing, tough on immigration MP, defecting to Labour, saying only Keir Starmer can stop the boats. Right? As a pure political calculation, setting morals and principles aside, that makes complete sense to me as why that would be appealing. So this was Natalie Elphicke speaking after her defection.
Well, in 2019, the Conservatives stood on a manifesto that was very much centre ground. But under Rishi Sunak, they've abandoned the centre ground and broken many election promises. Meanwhile, under Keir Starmer, Labour have changed. And I think that change is going to bring a much better future for our country. And that's why I'm so keen to join the Labour Party and play my part in bringing that important future forward.
Okay, so a lot of questions straight up. Lots of Labour figures unhappy, one could say, uncomfortable, perhaps. She's a very right-wing MP. She's said things about immigration that have offended and upset people within the Labour Party, are not really in tenor with the general tone of Labour, or even the tone of Labour under Keir Starmer, because, well, Keir Starmer has obviously taken a sort of a harder line on things like law and order than you might have heard during the Corbyn era. He is still a centre-left politician, and the language he uses is not the language that the right of the Conservative Party uses about things like immigration. So some Labour people across the party have been worried about this. It looked like they'd weathered that. The strength... Keir Starmer is incredibly strong in his grip of the Labour Party. They know they're on course for government. They don't want to rock the boat. It's got a bit haywire over the weekend. Of course, this is political. However, there are real questions being raised. So, got to be very careful how we talk about this. There's a lot of alleged here. But these are the stories as they were reported in the papers, and I'll go to Theo for reaction. But Natalie Elphicke has been accused of lobbying ministers over her then-husband Charlie's sexual assault case. She already apologised this week for sort of criticising the women who had accused her husband, and sort of pre-divorce she was defending her husband as he was appealing his sentence. She's obviously since separated, divorced, and she set out basically a statement apologising on the record for the first time for those things. But now there's sort of a new angle in the Sunday papers. Miss Elphicke is accused of asking Sir Robert Buckland, the then Justice Secretary, to help move the date of the case, apparently to avoid publicity. Spokesperson for her says it's nonsense. Sir Robert says she was told in no uncertain terms that it would have been completely inappropriate to speak to the judge about the trial at all. The BBC has confirmed that with Sir Robert. No formal complaint has been made as of yet. Could be heading that way, I don't know. Labour's Jonathan Ashworth says, I don't understand why the Lord Chancellor at the time did not raise this and why he's raised it now. David Cameron says this raises serious questions about Keir Starmer's judgment. Theo, what's going on here? This feels... obviously this is kind of a plague on both houses' story, because if there are serious problems here, it's kind of a case of, well, the Tories didn't raise it until she left them, and then Labour took her. So it could yet blow over. I don't know. But beyond, like, politics, how will this affect this or that? I think we know a lot of these stories don't cut through massively. At least not in sort of pole-shifting ways. First of all, do you think this raises questions about Keir Starmer's judgment? Second of all, how serious is this? Because anything involving things like sexual assault and impropriety with regards to the courts and the independence of the judiciary feels very serious to me. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that there's a few moving parts of this. I think starting with Keir Starmer's judgment, I can see why optically he would think this is a good move. She's the MP for Dover, which is on the forefront of the small boats, I'm told. Secondly, she was someone who was potentially defecting instead to reform. So having someone who's so clearly dedicated, not only constituency-wise, but also ideologically to, opposing Sunak over the small boats crisis, if you can call it that, and I suppose taking a new angle on it, I can see how that would be appealing to him. I think personally for me, and this is not talking electorate, but personally for me, I think it says a lot more about the Tories than Labour, that this was apparently kept under the rug until it was able to be politically leveraged to come out. But then obviously electorally speaking, I'm not going to lie, and I lament this fact, I think a case of sleaze and corruption and lobbying around a sexual assault case is not something that will raise too many eyebrows given the record of just this parliament. And we have recurrent cycles where sleaze allegations become ubiquitous and then they kind of go, back into the shadows. And we're in one of those periods where the whole political establishment is seen as kind of sleazy, especially the Tories. But I would say, in light of this, it's a poor judgment by Starmer, despite what I said about the position on immigration, because it does look good for Labour to have a Tory who's given up on Sunak over immigration.
I think you're right, Theo, and I think it is that classic thing of maybe one reason this won't escalate or could not escalate is the thing of if the Tories raise this to an investigation or push for an investigation, that's just as likely to reveal difficult questions for the Conservatives as it is for Labour. But across the board, a very sordid affair, potentially a misjudgment from Keir Starmer. Sonny, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't really have much to add, to be honest. I think I'm probably in agreement with Theo on it is shady, it's a bit strange, but it is kind of almost unfortunately what we're used to in current Parliament.
Yeah, and the sort of ongoing saga of sort of stories that definitely make people feel poorly about politicians across the board, fairly or unfairly. MPs will point out that the vast majority of them aren't doing sleazy things. It's a handful that are sort of being caught doing this stuff or are being inferred in sort of improprieties. It is a minority of MPs. But anyway, sort of looking wider, I think this story does point, and a few people have raised this week, Keir Starmer's ruthlessness. He is essentially on a one-man mission to annihilate the Conservative Party. He's willing to take right-wing ERG members. He's willing to say and do any number of things that would have been unthinkable for a Labour leader a few years ago. And it's all for sort of this single-minded purpose of getting his party back into government. There will be a lot written about this in the years to come if, as looks likely, Keir Starmer succeeds and gets his party in power with a healthy majority. Quick listen here to what Keir Starmer had to say this week about immigration. He went to Dover to do a speech, did not miss an opportunity, revealed former head of counter-terror policing Neil Basu backing his plan, obviously former hard-right Tory MP Natalie Elphicke backing his plan. This is what he had to say.
Today we are here on serious business because this is a community on the front line of one of the gravest challenges we face as a nation. Over 8,000 people have made the perilous journey across the Channel in small boats this year, on track to surpass the record set in 2022. As the country's chief prosecutor, I smashed the terrorist gangs, and I know we can smash the people smuggling gangs. Britain can do better. Labour will do better. We will end this farce. We will restore serious government to our borders, tackle this problem at source, and replace the Rwanda policy permanently. We will set up a new command with new powers, new resources, and a new way of doing things. Border Security Command, the best of the best. From the National Crime Agency, the Border Force, Immigration.
You get the picture. That goes on for quite a while. But that's, yeah. Keir Starmer is...
I almost forgot he was Director of Public Prosecutions. I'm glad he reminded me.
Yeah. You can expect, by the way, to hear lots more of that. Labour, they think people still haven't quite got that, so they're going to keep sort of pushing it. Another Labour story, actually, from this week, very interesting. David Lammy, the man who will be, by all accounts, Britain's next Foreign Secretary, taking over from David Cameron, talking about sort of his and Labour's commitment to Atlanticism, their belief in strong ties with the US. He has strong ties with with Obama, with the Obama administration, with people in the Biden administration, but also he struck up a friendship with J.D. Vance, the figure tipped to be Trump's national security advisor should Trump win the presidency, has said he'd rather work with Labour than the Tories. Labour seem more constructive. So Labour are actually, Keir Starmer's Labour and David Lammy in particular, are getting really positive reaction from both the Biden camp and the potential sort of Trump government being formed. Just thought it was a staggering story, really, just in terms of you don't see Labour people cozying up to Trump, but this is sort of the diplomacy you would expect from a government in waiting. It's interesting, isn't it, Theo?
Yes, it really is. And I suppose it hammers home the fact that there are a government in waiting. They need to be pragmatic. They need to look at what's happening later in this year in the United States. There's an election happening. The good chance that we'll have a Labour government alongside a Trump administration, and UK-US relations must go on. And that will be important, especially in light of potential escalations in the Middle East, ongoing conflict in Ukraine. It's pragmatic. And I think it does, again, show, as you say, a lot of things going on with Labour as they prep for government is kind of unthinkable. And I think they're taking a much more, I suppose, the best way I can phrase it is liberal establishment position, I suppose, more equivalent to, I suppose, the Biden, Obama administrations, and having a broad appeal. And I suppose if you're going to be more, I suppose, less like Blair, but somewhere in between, if that makes sense.
Yes. Before we wrap up, is there anything you two guys are looking for in the weeks ahead or the week ahead in terms of politics? Anything that's caught your eye that we haven't covered, sort of away from the headlines on the pod?
Sonny, you go first.
Sonny's in the back of the room right now.
Yeah. No, sorry. Yes. No, I find
Sonny's
it
just
very interesting to listen to. I'm not that upset about it, to be honest. Oh god, that's a good question. Not massively. I think it's gonna be very interesting to see where the Conservative Party is trying to prep for the campaign for the election, because like we kind of, like you two have said, that this does feel like Labour Party feels like a government waiting.
Yeah.
The Conservative Party is going to have to start thinking, oh my god, where are we going to even try? Like, is that, I mean, you know, if I'll be honest, if someone from the Conservative Party came to me now, I don't know why they would, but if they did, and they said, you know, Sonny, where should we fight? I'd be like, maybe leaving, you know, probably focus on getting the best job outside of government that you can, to be honest, mate, because you're kind of doomed. So this is also the Conservative Party's time, whoever's left, whoever has belief, to try and figure out a place for winning. So it's going to be interesting to see where they try and push and what fantastic numbers they can produce, which I think is going to be very little, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I think...
can,
go on, Theo.
I can add, I think, yes, it's a virtual certainty that Labour will form a majority. The Tories are essentially a sitting duck administration. So in terms of the roles of smaller parties, while the local elections weren't too promising, we still can't rule it out. And I am on the lookout for a Farage announcement, because I think a Farage announcement about him running could potentially change the potential fortunes of reform. And I mean potentially just him running in the best possible seat he can find and winning, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's the reform can't be squeezed scenario, which means the wipeout that the polls show becomes real. Because right now, I guess we temper it by going, oh, they'll probably get a bit of the vote back. You know, they'll finish like in 1997. It won't be apocalyptic. It'll just be a landslide defeat. If reforms stay how they're polling now into the election because of Farage, that's where like the Tories are on like double or single figures in terms of seats.
Yeah.
Which would be incredible. I mean, the figure to watch is if they get like 150 seats or something, they've done worse than the Duke of Wellington in 1832. And that would be an all-time...
If you go back to the 19th century, you know you're doing really bad. You have to go back that far to find examples.
Yeah. It's going to be an all-time low. Yeah. It's kind of plausible because that could be a decent result. You know, 150 seats. They're still firmly the official opposition and the challengers to Labour. You know, they're not off the map. They're just in the wilderness, you might say.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the idea of a third party becoming the official opposition is hilarious to think of.
It is, but also probably bad for democracy, because if Ed Davey gets up at the dispatch box and just goes, we're supporting the government every week, it's kind of a bit rubbish, isn't it? We probably need to...
I've got...
Go on, Sonny.
Sorry, I was going to say, I've got a question for you two.
Okay.
Do you think, and if there is, or do you think there's people inside the Conservative Party who are planning for what is going to be a good election for us, and that's going to be trying to get at 150 seats or pushing for 200 seats or even just making sure you're above 100? Or do you think there's enough people in there who still got some sort of weird belief that they could do something for them magical?
You won't believe it, but our friends at The Guardian actually have a story about this. So the party has extended its strategy to defending, because obviously defending seats is normally it's a handful of seats you think you might lose. And in a good year, maybe that's like 50 seats or something. And you go on the offensive. Often you go on the offensive.
They're trying to defend the country.
Yeah, often you go on, I think the Tory strategy up to this point has been, we're on the defensive in 80 seats and on the offensive in 20 seats. It's sort of keeping up the delusion that they're going to pick up a few seats. And that they're only going to lose 80. They have now marked as vulnerable all seats with majorities up to and beyond 15,000 majorities. So really safe Tory seats are now being considered vulnerable. And they've taken basically every seat off the offensive list and they've marked 200 constituencies as vulnerable. So it is now Conservative Party policy, quietly, to purely defend and accept that they're on the defensive in seats that were nowhere close in 2010, 2015, 2017, 2019. I mean, seats that they won in 2005 when they lost quite heavily to Labour are now defensive seats, which I think says a lot. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, Theo.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I think it suggests that the mindset is think of the next political cycle. If you're not going to survive the next election, you've got two options. If you want to stay in politics, you have to think what's going to happen to the Tory party in its wilderness years that are coming. Is it going to go far right? Is it going to become moderate? What's going to happen then? You're thinking potentially, 6-7 years in advance, or just go get another job.
Yeah, and those that are sticking around, I think it is a case of like, I guess it's the Labour mindset. In 2019, Labour people were going, it's going to be it's going to be a decade or more. Keir Starmer will like get us like 30 more seats and we'll sort of be a stable opposition. That's what they want, right? That's a actual good scenario for the Tories is maybe you end up on like 200 seats or something. Brilliant. We're in no worse a position than Labour were last time. And, if things go your way, maybe you fight it out to a hung parliament in 2029. I mean, that is really good considering where they are right now. And it may not go that way. It's worth remembering.
Yes, I mean, I don't think the candidates are there in the Tory party. I think the majority, all factions have been kind of disgraced. But Corbyn, when Starmer took over from Corbyn, it was presented as a completely new change of leadership and the cleansing of the leadership of anyone associated with Corbyn really effectively created the image that the party was in new hands, and his really aggressive move away from the left really, turn the fortunes around relatively quickly. I mean, there was COVID and everything.
Yeah.
That was effective. I don't think the Tories have anyone in the wings who can pull that off, because I think most of the party has been disgraced generally.
The thing I find funny, and I will raise this, and it's good for you, Theo, actually, this. In February 2020, and I scoffed at this. And I scoffed at it again in 2021. Theo said, and I quote, and if I scroll back far enough on my Instagram, I'm sure I can find it, I think Starmer will win a majority in 2024. That was your real quote from Theo in 2020, before the pandemic.
Yeah, I've always been prescient.
You've always backed him, Theo.
How did you know? Do you know what's so funny, though? Theo, I think, thought there was a real chance of Corbyn winning in 2019, which is even funnier.
I did. That's why I built an underground bunker. No, but on a real note, I think it was because in the lockdown, like, I was going to these parties in Downing Street, and I was like, this is illegal, right?
For God's
Public
sake.
finds out, you guys are done. And, yeah.
Theo was at, like, the Sean Bailey parties.
Yeah. I saw Johnson walk down with a bottle of champagne, and I thought, oh, this is going to be it.
This is it, lads. I could see that 20-point polling deficit just around the corner. I mean, that is the long game. Theo's just sat arms folded. Like, at that point, by the way, I think the numbers were the Tories were on 52% and Labour were on like 20%. It was ridiculous. And
can you tell me exactly what date that was? Because I have no memory of that.
it was before he became leader, but when we knew he would be leader.
Oh, so that's like very early 2020.
Yeah, and you were like, I think Starmer will win a majority. And I remember it because I took hope from that at the time. I was like,
well, here you go, Toby. I've been vindicated and you should be happy.
yeah. But if it ages like your 2019 prediction, I don't know. Sunak on course for a shock majority, anyone? Wouldn't it be funny if the first election where you truly like talked down the Tories' chances was the election where like they won massively?
Well, I've predicted 12 out of the last 2 major political events.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, you were very bullish on no leadership challenge, and you were right about that as well. You kept going, I know you want it, Toby, but it's not coming. And you were right. Again.
Yes. And despite all of this, to my credit, you were still in denial about Jan 2025.
Oh, no. Does this mean every week you ruin it at the end of the pod by going, Toby, January 2025?
I don't think a January 25 is going to happen. I think it will probably be closer to October or September. I'm more praying, to be honest, at this level.
I know I've held this position bullishly for a while, but I think I might need to jump ship to not look like a complete idiot. Because at this point, I think I'm just doing it because I've been doing it for a while.
No, commit to the bit. I mean, in fairness, you were also on Team May, so you've gone from one extreme.
God, you're going way back now. You're going way back.
We started this pod with you dead certain. You were like, don't worry, Toby. This podcast will be done and dusted by the spring. Keir Starmer will be in number 10. It'll all be over. There's no way they wait the whole year. Well,
there is way. There is way that they do that.
There is way, and they are doing that at present. What are we in May? We're still in May. It's the 12th of May. Oh, God. Guys, it's a long way. There was a quote from a government figure, really miserably quoted in the Times, I think it was. They went, it's going to be an excruciating 6 months. Yeah, it is. But it's nice to spend it with friends. And that marks the end of this week's Political Paradigms. We'll be back next week. I'm sure more goings-on will be happening in Westminster. Parliament is still in all this week, so see what's going on. I think they'll be taking May half-term off at the end of the month. See ya. Sorry, I'm going to let this in on the pod. We just started recording the outro. The connection dropped, and then I was like, Theo, I just said goodbye to you, and he just sat in silence for about 30 seconds.
Thanks. It was great having me.
It's always great having Theo. Sonny, thank you for joining me. Oh,
Thank
come
you very
on.
much. Sorry. It was very nice to be here.
Why did you think we were on a lag? Anyway, that's it. I'm going to go out and enjoy the sun. Last day of it, potentially. And
don't say that. It's almost as bad as a January election.
We'll see you.
Yeah.
We'll see you next week, folks.